Chris, if you don't mind, I want to start with two things. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, number one, that laugh that we just had before I hit broadcast about getting onto the highway, coming off the on ramp, and you laughed and you said no GPS, which kills me because it's difficult when you're on the road, but you don't really know where you're going. The second thing is, I thought, and this is a Seinfeld reference, the episode where Kramer and the car sales guy are driving, and there's almost no gas left in the car, and they're like, "There's no gas left." He's like, "I don't care. I'm just gonna go." I feel like that's us too. We're just driving with like this much left in the tank, no GPS, and it's just I don't know if you're frightened or if you feel free, but that's what I thought.
That's what I like that. I like that as a Friday meditation, that idea that somehow you can head out with the belief that you'll find what you need. Because that's, I've watched people well, I'll backtrack it. I tend to be like that with my car. Like I actually do. I don't know how I've managed to not be stranded somewhere, yet at that exact same moment of thought, I honestly believe like it's an impossibility. Like somehow I'm going to notice, or it's just going to ping up in my head that, I need to get gas, And it's funny because when you're driving, it's the funny thing about GPS. When you're driving, you actually have a choice. You have a choice here. And here's the maybe the metaphor for the extended metaphor. Who knows? We're gonna drag this one through the dirt a bunch of times till we get it right. But if you're driving and you're going out for that drive, I think part of the illusion of the support tools, let's say, and I'll say even gas, or the monitoring things that are the gas, or turning on the GPS, is that there's a choice there to stare at the gas tank, or to stare at the GPS, or to look at your surroundings. And if this podcast for me, what I'm really starting to appreciate is that it's getting me to look at the surroundings and see what's actually going on around the signals. And you and I have been in a ton of conversations, and with other people, like with Stephen Hurley and the whole On Ed Mentors group, where we spend a lot of fun time, let's say, breaking down the signals that are happening around moments. But it's also cool to come back to the moments, because I got to be honest, if every time I got in the car, I actually had a fear of running out of gas, just point blank fear of running out of gas, I don't know if I would necessarily drive my car. Like if that was what was part of the fuel to my fear, I probably wouldn't drive that much, because I'd constantly be worried about, am I going to make it? Am I going to be stranded somewhere? Is anyone going to help me? That's a good start, man. No GPS. You bring it to the classroom. I mean, that we've talked about that too. Seeing those moments where you really do need to kind of just put the plan aside and kind of go for it, because what's manifesting in front of you is so much more valuable, important. It's going to create legacy. It's going to create conversation. It's going to be the thing that someone walking by that's leaning in the doorway, they're not going to know what the heck's going on. But you inside, you're just like I said, you're not watching the GPS. You're in the moment. You're driving with 22 kids in the family roadster, and it's awesome. So I need a sip of coffee now. You did that to me.
You make me think of how much structure people want built into education. Like if you think about it, long range plans, day plans, totally being basically having your GPS on and knowing where you're going all the time. And that you can't do that. I mean, I'm not saying you can't have long range plans and stuff like that. Those are important. You need to have a big picture, right? Like if you get in your car and you just want to go for a drive, you have a good idea of where you are, like a sense of awareness, because you've driven in that area so many times. It's like teaching the same grade. You know the curriculum, and you have a map. But it's important sometimes to just drive and you turn on a street and you like what you see and you enjoying the moment, so you go with it. And it's the same in teaching. I think you'd agree that you get these moments during your day or during the week where you go off track for whatever reason, and then you take time to enjoy the time being off track because there's still good things happening there. It's just not on the GPS, and that's okay. So you made me think of that in terms of like the whole premise of our podcast and kind of not demystifying certain things about the work we do, or sometimes, making things more complicated as we talk about it. But I agree with you. And the thing about, today's on-ramp was short, but I feel like it was kind of deep in a way for me. For what I shared with you was deep. But then when I reflect and I think of you, what I talked about, it was me talking, but I talked about something of mine and something of yours, and they were both quite deep. Well, maybe I can share and you can elaborate or not, but you recently posted on your blog a letter that you had written to your ASL teacher, which is kind of cool because I don't actually know if you gave it to her or if it's just out there on the internet and she doesn't know, but you felt the need to do it. But what you wrote, I read it this morning before we came on. Oh, and it's how cool is it that you and I are podcasting on a Friday morning and neither one of us are skipping work.
Yep. Yeah, we're not like we're not hidden in some Starbucks somewhere. It just before you go into that, do you remember when we first got to meet in real life? And we were talking about connecting in digital spheres as the I said it. I over romanticized it, and I said there's spaces where you almost start to think of it like an affair, like you're sort of sneaking away to do your connectivity, you're sneaking away to kind of meet these people, and it's less about that it actually is that, but more about the language that's used about that. And it's because often we talked about having to take time away from other important things to do this sort of secret thing. And it's just funny. That's what you bring to mind when you say, we're not skipping off school here and skipping off work. Like someone's going to find out, where's Clough and Chidiac? I don't know. Did they call in sick? I don't know. They didn't call in sick. So there's a sweet spot to be able to sort of just have what feels like a bit of a free, I don't know, this feels like a freebie a little bit. Like, really, you're right. There's something to this. Like, it's like Friday, because any other time, I don't think we've ever talked like week time during the daytime. It was always just, yeah, sure, let's talk on a Wednesday night. You good at 7:30 p.m.? I got to do 8:30 p.m. 8:30 p.m. is good. Let's do that. So you're right. It is a little bit like we've snuck away, found another space to sneak away to. So, and
even when you suggested, when you connected with me and said, "Hey, are we good for Saturday morning?" And I thought about it. I'm like, why don't we just do Friday morning if you're available? Because for me, I'm waking up at the same time.
Yeah,
and it's like, let's just do it. Let's just get it out of the way, kind of thing. But yeah, there's something cool about. I feel free today. Like I feel just like it's a freebie. It's a free day, right?
Yeah.
So the letter you wrote, for me, it was like I felt humbled reading your letter because it was so, to me, it was raw and honest and open. And I gave you a big thumbs up when I was done reading it because I just felt like the space that you had to be in to write that is a really incredible place for people who like to write, for people who like to reflect on what they're about or what they're experiencing. There's a freedom there that comes with that. And so I give you a big thumbs up for that. It's on the internet, so I'm sure whether you talk about it or not, people will find it because it's on your blog. But wow, man, good for you. Good for you to take the time to reflect on your learning, to reflect on your success, your failure, the different emotions that you experienced when you were going through that process. I think if learners take time to go through a process like that, then whatever it is they will have gone through or given up on, they will be able to see that in a whole different way. And I think that there's a lot of value to that in terms of understanding your potential as the learner and also understanding who you are, maybe some of the things you might need to overcome as a human, or just learning to be comfortable with what you are, who you are, where you want to be. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. That letter. So going back to I guess where you started. It's both. It's a post and it's also a letter that I gave to the instructor. So it was both. I had mentioned before in bits and pieces that I was taking the American Sign Language course. It had been something that had been on my mind for a few years, wanting to. It was definitely sparked by curiosity. Something in there was some purpose, as in I thought it's a space that it would be good for me to develop. It would be good for me to develop new ways of communication. It kind of fell in step with, I've always enjoyed languages in general. Like I've enjoyed the idea of, not just the idea, I've enjoyed and actually been able to travel and use languages in context. So, French, Italian, Spanish, a little bit of Portuguese, all these little pieces that have kind of fallen into my lap. And then the languages opened up a space where, by engaging with the language and sort of playing with the immersion into the language, other things opened up for me. So understanding deeper parts of the culture, or people are actually willing to interact with you in a way that's a little bit different than a tourist. Like they want to speak with you, not at you. And those, I've really always believed that, some students, that one of the places that I go when students taking French as a second language, let's say, and they're not entirely engaged with it, I always look to the system and say, you need to start having more trips to places where they speak French and bringing in the cultural artifacts and the moment, so the kids and the students can see not just the relevancy, but it automatically boosts the authenticity of it. So ASL fell into one of those things for me as another language. And I've been sort of thinking a lot about what planted the seed in my head and didn't let it go. I think part of it was learning the new language. I think the other part of it is in my background of interest, I also have a theater, like drama and improv. So I have a sense of, whether talent or skill, I have a sense of what telling story and performance is about. And if you do gesture, or you're looking to sort of express yourself beyond words, then theater really is a great way to sort of explore that, because you get other tools to be able to sort of fit in the other pieces in your story. So ASL worked into that as well, because many times when I watched someone sign, I thought, man, there's a whole other layer of communication going on here that I can't access. It's like I think I know what's going on, but sorry. At the time, I really did believe. That's the turning point. I did believe I knew what was going on, and then I got inside the course and I realized it was completely different. It was so different. And where I landed, I think where I've landed right now with it, is that it gave me a very clear gray space between who and what I am as a learner, and then the space is, so who and what I am as a learner, gray space, how and what I say about myself as a learner. And I fell into a space between those two that I was not prepared for. So yeah, and writing the piece took me, it was actually multiple posts at first. And I thought, no, you know what? I kind of thought everybody does something for the teacher at the end, so to speak. So this will be my way just to speak to the teacher as a fellow teacher, but to somehow articulate that gray space between, like I said, what I am, who I am as the learner, and how I talk and what I say about myself as a learner. And I think I'm still sitting in that gray space. Not entirely comfortable, but not entirely comfortable. I guess have to do that. Still not entirely comfortable with what I found there.
Is your ASL instructor also an OCT? No. Okay. So strictly ASL stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
What's next? Are you going to do part 2?
It's Can I ask you a question first?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you ask that question? What?
Because I want to know how much, number one, how much of a glutton for punishment are you? Number one.
That
Number
hasn't
two,
come out in our conversations yet.
number two, I feel like you seem like an intense guy. Like you seem like it's unfinished business. That's the vibe I get from you. It's unfinished business for you. So I just wonder if you'll jump right in, if you'll take a little bit of a break and then jump in. I know you're a busy guy with the family and stuff, but you strike me as a person who enjoys taking on challenges. And even though, you know, we've talked a lot about, I don't want to use the word negative, but that's how it's going to come out right now. We've talked about the negative aspects of your learning experience, and you haven't had negative. It's just been the learning has not come easy. There's been lots of struggle. So I'm using the word negative there, but it's not the right word. So I just see you as a guy of challenge. I see you as a guy of growth. And I think that what better way to torture yourself than to take part two, where you're probably going to experience some of the same cognitive dissonance and, you know, like, what are we going to talk about on the podcast now that you're done, right? Like, so all those things are going through my mind. That's why I ask.
So before I jump right into that, couple thoughts. I've had a lot of people ask me that question, and you're right. I think you started to say you're kind of an intense guy, and then you kind of pulled it back off the table. But I've been accused of that before too. And it's funny. It's usually self-effacing intensity. So it's not necessarily, I'm not throwing out the smolder to you. Like, I'm more just holding, I'm thinking about, or overthinking, could be thinking, overthinking, but I'm bringing it inwards and sort of trying to really measure my words, trying to be authentic. That's what I'm doing on the inside. I believe being authentic, but hey, who and what I am versus how I talk about what I am, I could be in that gray space as well. But sure, intensive scrutiny as to what I do next. I've enjoyed people asking me that question because I can answer it, but I also wonder why that question is asked. Is the question being asked? Well, in your case, you said you're curious whether or not I'm going to go in for more punishment. So I can accept that. Sure. I also wonder, is it a natural tendency for us to assume that we move on to the next course? Is it our natural tendency to assume that because we've have a sense of completion that we must move on from there? And it brings into question that idea of something being a practice as opposed to something finished. And I didn't put this in the post, but I would say this has very much become a practice as opposed to a fait accompli. Like, there's not something finished here. And regardless of the mark, because it is a marked thing. I had my exam last night. It is a marked thing. I get a mark at the end, but regardless of the mark, I am not sure if I will take the same course over again or move on to the second course. So in a simply, I don't know. Am I interested in learning more? Yes. Am I a busy guy and have other interests? Yes. When I think specifically about taking ASL 102, I think it's called, so it's the next level, then it's unfinished business. I'm still in the gray space. I don't know if I'll take the next one or take the same one. So, but it is fascinating. If we take it to the classroom, out of this, that all-encompassing belief that success is based on forward trajectory, I don't know. I think you and I have kind of played in that space a little bit, talking about what about lateral, what about lateral success? What does lateral success look like? If it isn't hierarchical, as in you're moving through that next, and you get an 80 now, I better get an 85 next time. If I get that 85, I better get the 90 next time. Making that type of learning, making experience transactional like that, I'm really trying to rip that out of my mindset. And that was one of the other gifts that came from this course, because I had I had the impulse to leave, but I became compulsively connected to it. Right. I stayed in that sort of gray zone in between. I said, and I think I told you this before, it's the worst feeling, but I think I need to feel it. I need to stay. And I really do believe that that space will benefit not only myself, but other learners that I work with in future. But how do you sell that? How do you sell that to, you're in a PD session and say, you know what you're going to love about this PD session, it's going to make you feel like crap, but you won't leave the room. You will not leave the room, and you're going to walk away just confused, and it's going to be wonderful. It's not, PD doesn't work like that. So maybe it should. I don't know.
I think it depends. And I think it depends on the person and whether they want to be there. How often have you been in a PD session that was mandated where you're just like, I'm not feeling this at all, right? Like that's happened a lot to people, to educators for whatever reason. It's when you want to be somewhere and when you want to be learning something that you are okay to feel the pain. Like my love or my connection to coding in the classroom is a rocky one, to say the least. There's something about it that I find stimulating. Then there's other parts that are like telling me in my mind, this isn't the be all and end all. So let's not make it that. So anyway, long story short, I remember last year, the year before, I was part of a group of people who got to go and spend a day just dealing with coding and coding in the classroom and how the two come together. And I remember going in thinking, okay, this is gonna hurt, but I'm in. I know what's coming my way. I'm interested. Something's gonna happen here that's gonna benefit me and benefit my students. I kind of already knew that. So going into something that I wasn't 100% buying into was an excellent experience for me. And so, but I was ready. Like I was open and ready, knowing that it was going to be uncomfortable just because of my prior experience. And then something else that you said about people asking you if you're going to take the course again. I took an AQ in 2006. And at the time, people were asking me, well, okay, you're done now. You're going to take the second one? I said, no, I'm not feeling it. I'm not ready. I took the second one 2 years ago. So it took me 10 years to come around for a host of reasons. Took 10 years for the right circumstances, the right feeling to exist for me to jump into the part to get it done. So it's interesting. It's a neat point of conversation, right? Like when you talk about your learning, when you talk about your readiness, when you talk about when you're not ready for learning, but you jump in anyway. Like it's all very organic to me. It's all very real, and parts of people's thinking that you don't normally get access to, or at least I don't. Like in the busyness of the day, yesterday I had a day of professional learning yesterday, which was so welcome for me at this point in the school year. I was at an assessment and evaluation committee meeting, and I was loving every minute of it. I was soaking it all up because I haven't been to a committee meeting in a while, and I felt I needed to be around those people, talking around the topics that we are engaged in right now. And I was talking to a colleague at lunch, a high school teacher who's part of the subgroup that I'm in, who I never get a chance to talk to high school people. And so we're sitting there having lunch, and we were both just kind of like deflated just from the time of year, right? And I said to him, like, was it hard for you to come today? Like, was it? He's like, no, it was the easiest choice I've made all week. I was kind of waiting for this committee meeting so I could get myself out of the room and get to a place where I was going to be working with people who have the same interests, who want to be here to learn what the topic is that we're talking about. So not only are we providing feedback to the system for the system, we are learning, professional learning. We are developing as educators around assessment and evaluation. And it was just neat how I was looking at them as we were eating. I was like, this is cool that we're both kind of on the same page. We're both feeling the same thing. We both want to be surrounded by the same people. And it was a nice way for us to end our week. And so I left that feeling energized from the learning and from the discussion, which I've told you before, those things make me better in the classroom. So next week, when I go back into the room, I have a little bit more in my head about assessment and evaluation and how it impacts my students and how I can continue to use what I'm learning to positively benefit them, right? Not to negatively benefit them. So I just the whole talk of learning, right? Like the conversations we're having around learning, about the feelings that come with it, negative and positive, and that you're not always going to have positive feelings when you enter into new learning. In fact, there's a whole culture out there that says that you're going to feel dissonance, right? Like you're going to feel incompetent, you're going to feel frustration, you're going to feel anger, sadness, whatever, the whole slew of negative stuff that comes when your head hits a brick wall with the learning and you can't get past it because you need to either practice something or you need more time to soak it up. But you'll get through it. You'll get through it if you persist. And if you work on it, you will eventually come out of those feelings and enter back into the positive vibes, feeling a sense of accomplishment with the experience that you just went through.
I shared last night. So the exam last night that we had to do was there was 2 parts. I'll share the video with you. Me telling a story. I think I'd mentioned this before. So I had to record a story, and it's a kind of a known anecdote or joke in the within the sort of the deaf. Within deaf culture, it's sort of one of the tools. I think it's one of the tools that's used not only to teach ASL, but it's also just it's a commentary on some of the blind spots with ASL. And I'll share the video with you, and you can check it out. You see what I mean? So we had to do that. We had to hand that in, and then we had to perform a Q&A in front of the instructor. So we were partnered up, and each of us were asking questions back and forth. And I told my partner last night, and I hadn't mentioned this to her up to this point. I said, when I looked at the syllabus, in my mind, I wasn't even going to do any of the summative work. I wasn't going to do the exam. I wasn't going to hand in the video. And the individual looked at me like, and the response was really interesting, because the response was, but you paid $300 to do this course. And I realized in that space how different my thinking is about learning, let's say from my partner, but also that I didn't have the money value wasn't driving my immersion and my participation. Now, this is a very heightened 30,000 feet. Clough, you're a teacher, you get it, but I think you mentioned before that that admission of being able to articulate what's actually going on in the gray zone is what comes, I think, from that pursuit of reflective practice, to be able to clearly, and you said raw, just call it out, like say what it is that's exacting that gray zone, and see if somebody kind of connects with that. I will tell you, my partner did not connect with that, because right away she had fear that I was just going to walk out in the middle of we were practicing a little bit, and it was funny because she kept on asking, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So how do you articulate clearly that, yes, I am okay, and I have these thoughts about learning, and I've really come to enjoy existing in that space, because you're right. There's a certain sense of liberty to be able to speak clearly to your thoughts, let's say, but let's say to bring in an emotional state that people may not really jive with it, but they can travel that road with you. Hey, they don't need the GPS. They don't have to see the road ahead, but they can stay with you in your thoughts. But I haven't been in situations before where people are just like, "You're too much, man." Like almost like I've said something blasphemous according to EDU. What are you saying that for? Like, dude, it's not about how many times do we say it in a safe, palatable way? It's not about the mark, it's about the learning. It's not about the mark, it's about the learning. And walking that talk in spaces where people don't get it, that's what I was getting from my partner. Because every time she would do a sign and ask me a question, you know, she asked me my name, and then she would follow up. She's like, "Are you okay?" She keep checking me. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good. All good here." What if we actually got our students addicted to that idea that you can walk away from the mark? You can walk away from whatever that long-term investment is, because the trade-off is, by tethering yourself to that future, you might not be paying attention to what's happening right here in front of you. And I think for some people, that's their teaching gray zone. How do I sort of get the kids in that space? You know what? I will tell you, and this is just the one brief, you're that on our on-ramp, and you were talking about the piece of media that you created. That was one of the things that I came out so clearly, was remaining in the space and not going too far outside of that space to sort of say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and I want to share it with you right now. And stay with me here. And your media piece, where it wrapped, including that call out to whoever witnesses your media piece to get back in touch with you, is the exact type of wraparound that makes it even more complex. It does not make it simpler. It acknowledges that this is an ongoing conversation. I've just stepped in. Will you keep moving with me? So that was my appreciation of the piece you put together.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that. And thanks for the talk, what you said about how can we move students away from the mark to the learning? And the first thing I thought was, the kids are already there. Like, my students are with me, and they're not losing anything by being at school. You get what I'm saying? Like, you lost $300, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you had to spend your hard-earned money to take your course, right? So they're right away, for most people, there's a connection that I just gave away something I've worked very hard for, and so I better get something in return. So I better work to make sure that my return is worthy of what I put out. Whereas my students are already at school. They're not going anywhere. They're not expected to be anywhere else. And it's unfortunate that sometimes they can't just learn for the sake of learning. They can't go through that experience because it's going to benefit them later. Like, I don't think they get that. And so maybe it's my job to try to bring that into their consciousness. I don't know, but we do talk a lot about you're here and there's nowhere for you else. Like, there's nowhere for you to be. This is where you belong at this age. This is how we do things here in this society. And so why don't you just buckle up and go for the ride instead of like pushing back all the time? And that's been a conversation a lot lately, is the pushback. And my students aren't pushing back in inappropriate ways. And so I'm also teaching them how to push back in ways that are appropriate for the environment that we're in. So there's a lot going on there. I wrote two things down. And I want to revisit. I'll start with the latter. Homework. Okay, so I guess I don't mind talking a little bit about the media that I created. So the EdTech team is going to be in Kitchener next weekend for the Ontario Summit featuring Google for Education. And I know that you will be in attendance, and other amazing educators will be in attendance as well that are part of our PLN. But I was kindly asked if I would attend the event and do an Ignite talk. And I let them know that I would not be attending the event, but that I'd be more than happy to create a video of some type of Ignite talk. And they're receptive to that. They like that, and they said, sure, go for it. And on the on-ramp, I was talking to you about my struggle of creating this piece of media, just because of different factors, where I currently am with my work as a teacher, the how, like, where I find myself in my journey this year with my particular group. And when at the end of the video, I kind of I say to whoever's watching, whoever's listening, reflect on what I've said, reflect on how you fit into my talk, and let me know. Like, I would love to know about where you are, whether you want to talk about it, share your reflection. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me, but I'd like to offer that. And I have to tell you that it reminds me of your homework at the end of the podcast when you drop homework on people, and it bothers me because I don't like homework. And here I am pulling a cluff on people who have paid a lot of money to, well, maybe I don't know now what they're going to do with my video, because I don't know if they're going to show it at the event or they're going to use it to lead up to the event. I don't know. And to be honest with you, I didn't do it. The reason why I said yes in the end was because it was going to give me a lot of time to figure out what is my message in this context, under these circumstances. What is my message to people? What could I possibly say to somebody else that might ignite something within them, that might motivate them a little bit? I don't know. So it was really cool to kind of sit with myself and deal with it. And that was the hard part, right? That was the part that hurt, because I had to look at myself and where I am at right now, which I don't particularly like the feelings that came with that. I don't like them at all, but I dealt with them and I was able to produce something in the end. And I'm happy that I was able to do that because I said I would. So that's good. The second thing I wanted to talk about was when you referred to the first time you and I met face to face. It was at one of the EdCan regional exchanges in Mississauga.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had to leave. So I made it to the venue and I was early. And I was in there chatting with the few other people who were early. And then I had to go back out to my car. I don't remember what I left in my car, but I left something in my car. And as I was going out, I saw you, but I didn't know it was you yet. And I was coming around the corner and you were stopped right in front of the school, the building where we were meeting. And you were doing something with your phone, like you were looking down at your phone and you were texting or reading something intensely. And I remember thinking, now when I go back to that memory, you looked like a Sherpa. You had this big backpack on, and you had your hat was on tight, and you were all just like you looked like you were going on an expedition. And the reason I say that is because I make the connection back to our conversation that we had a while ago about you being an EDU Sherpa, guiding people through the mountainous regions of the educational landscape. And
Can I jump in on that quick?
Yeah.
What I've come to realize is that, if we use it, I think when we talked about the Sherpa example in the beginning is that we idealize it a little bit, as in, it's good that you have a Sherpa. It's good because they can kind of lead you through these spaces. What I'm starting to find more and more on my behalf, though, is that my idea of making it easier doesn't necessarily make it easy on others. So it's sort of like, oh crap, we got Cluff the Sherpa again. Okay, we might make it out of this, but be prepared, like gear up. That's funny. That's the first time you shared that one. I didn't know that. Yeah, and it was. I can think back. It was what was happening was stuff. There was stuff happening back in the program. So I was communicating back with my colleague. So the people checking in my program, I work with students on suspension and on expulsion from their home schools. So there was things going on just as I arrived that I was providing some support for. So it was Sherpa-ness in the moment, and Sherpa-ness extending it back to my my school. That's interesting.
Well, if we can take it further, I remember coming back into the venue and you were unloading your gear. I was like, this guy, did this guy hike here? Where did this guy come from? And then I found out who you were. It was Cluff. We had only communicated via Twitter about podcasting.
Yeah.
And I believe at that time your Twitter profile picture was not a picture of you. So I had no idea who you were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So okay, so I'm gonna bring together a couple of things here. I've been thinking a lot, or I've been thinking a lot for a long time about how we harmonize our digital and actual selves. And I think you and I have played in that space a little bit. I think also you and I have come to spaces where we're getting more and more comfortable with where those two spaces exist and their proximity to one another and whether they're actually phased, right? And I had a really great conversation way back in the day with Roy and Lee and his transition from looking at digital spaces as real things and not, and it was funny, it was him, not a whole bunch of other podcasters and media people talking about the importance, because it's easy to talk about it from a safety security point of view, that you got to be careful with what you're posting, so you got to be careful with what you say in real life. But there's that separate part of persona, as in people can look at regardless of what you post, you create a set of expectations from your digital self. You create a belief system when people sort of see that, and then if they ever meet you in real life. And the work that it takes sometimes to keep those two things separate, I've started to say, no, I'm going to do the work to make them similar. I'm going to try and make them similar as opposed to keeping them separate. So, you talking about the message, and a little bit, I get a sense, a little bit of that struggle to sort of find, what is it, the message? What is it? What is my thing? I think is that next phase, or part of that little next phase, when you're looking at who you are as a teacher, connected with who you are as a man, connected with who you are as a father, and the other spaces. It's like all the ropes kind of being tightened to bring it together to something that you say, this is me. And when I heard the story that you shared, I think whatever your perception of it from the inside, as far as what it's communicating, it was clear to me that there was some struggle still with the ideas that you're putting forward, but that you were hitting on something that was real for you. Like I felt you were centered in what you were saying, even if you weren't sure what you were standing on. And I appreciated that kind of harmonizing, because it draws in so much more than just your digital self, and it draws in so much more than just your classroom context. And I like that when I start to connect with people that are exploring that space. I've heard it from other educators. I think that you either start in one of two places with your digital journey. You're sharing everything and you just don't really realize the implications, or you're completely compartmentalized and everything is locked down. And those can be for the exact same reasons, the same sort of naivete. But what happens when you put it in the same space and say, this is me? Like, you actually find the best stuff to put in the middle. I mentioned before, I was in an AQ, and there are educators that say, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not talking about home life at school, and I'm not talking about school life at home. And that's where I started with my Twitter use. I was, back in the day, everything was about branding it, putting something out in front of me that was called Beyond Binders. And I said it in a podcast, either with you or with somebody else. I said, my intent there was thinking that Chris Clough wasn't enough to get into conversations. So I wanted something that could sort of resonate in some way with the kitschiness of education. Oh, Beyond Binders, that's kind of cool. Oh, who is this person? Who's the person behind that? I've recently pursued this, or I've more actively pursued it, when you get these broad profiles of either blogs or social media feeds, where it's kind of a group, and they say this group has followed you, where I'll push back and I'll ask, who's behind this? And instead of following the group, I'll follow the two individuals that are actually behind the brand. I may follow the brand, but instead I might follow the person, because I'm looking to see, how do they harmonize the two? How is that brand reflected in their actual posts? And I tend to be more open to sort of pursuing that learning when I see that there's a connection between the two. So kudos to you for pushing the message and suffering through it. Thanks for noticing. Yeah, it's right, because I wasn't Twitter before. It's a good challenge to put out there to other educators. Are you actually Twitter? Are you there? And I'm not talking about being an egg. I'm saying, are you putting out the brand, or is it you? And yeah, I'm still wrestling with that sort of harmonizing, bringing the two things together.
Is it okay to just be the brand and not to be you?
For me, it wasn't. I was, because like I said, you start compartmentalizing or sharing everything. I started with compartmentalizing. I felt I needed to put up a box so that I could exist in these conversations, and somehow that made it safer. That was also in a time where you see so many people put this on their Twitter feed. These tweets are my own and do not reflect the opinions of my employer. Well, we know the truth is that they do. They always will, because you are employed, and anything that you say does reflect you. It was almost like the employer side, legal side, is saying, no, you're authentic. We're not going to allow you to sort of disaggregate yourself. You are a teacher, you are a man, you are a father, and you are also our employee. Don't say anything that, against your employer. So I think everyone has to choose their starting point. It comes back to also, I think last week we were talking about how far do you push your agenda, your activism in the class. You choose, are you going to compartmentalize? Are you going to sort of do everything? I think the harder part is starting from a place of harmony. It really is. I think it's a really challenging spot to be able to say, yep, you know what? I did a pretty good job here harmonizing who I am, and what I think.
I know you and I have had many on-ramp, off-ramp conversations around the brand, the people behind the brand, whether the people behind the brand are showing themselves or not. And I know I feel a little bit more raw in my approach talking to you about those things. You seem to always remain steadfast in terms of your I don't know what the word is, but like your approach to these topics, whereas I'm a little bit more fired up. It's unfortunate that for me, selfishly, it's hard to deal with people that I know that are spending their time trying to sell something when I think if they sold themselves, they'd be much more successful. Because knowing people as like the humans, they are good people. They have a lot of things to offer. But then when they stand behind a brand or are trying to only expose one part of themselves, which is it's their right. They're free to do what they want. I've talked to you about my perception of that, and then my perception of them. And I think in each instance, I'm kind of quickly reflecting through, in each instance, you and I have had conversations around this. I have to say that I've been disappointed. I've ended up being disappointed considering the people, and having known them for a while, enough time to get a feel for who they are, and then kind of feeling bad that they've taken the time to stand behind a brand or to create a brand and stand by it and only show that, when if they just showed themselves, they would be 100 times more successful, in my opinion. So, and maybe some people would say that about me, and I would love to have that conversation to actually understand what they saw, what they heard, and then how they can connect that to something else that I've done. I mean, there are certain brands that I wouldn't say I represent, but that are part of kind of how I've gotten to where I am today in my work as a teacher. But I've also taken a lot of time to put myself out there. And sometimes I don't want to put myself out there, right? Like there are lots of people who don't. Like I said, when I first connected with you, I don't recall you having a profile picture of who you actually were. I just remember, because you and I were going back and forth using direct messages to talk podcast stuff. And I remember thinking, I don't know who this guy is, but we're engaged in a conversation, a discussion that is a positive one. And there was no red flags for me to just stop communicating with you. So I was like, because that happens sometimes, right? When you don't show who you are, and then you get in, and then somebody tries to get into a deep discussion with you, I always try to look for, well, who is this person? Because I don't know who you are. Just like you don't know who I am, but you can see my face on my Twitter feed, right? Like there's a lot of layers to the social media thing. And I understand why people are hesitant to come into it. But I do see the value as an educator. I do see the value in using it to share new things and to learn from other people in a way that can't be done face to face with the time restrictions people have and the way that people are living their lives.
Was there, okay, I love that you introduced this. So was there any point where you thought like that you might not answer my questions? Was there any point, I like that you kind of introduced that element, like you're sort of measuring. What I hear is you were measuring your willingness to build a relationship, and whether that's exactly what you're feeling, but that's, I think, I'm authenticating what was happening in that moment. I've come and I've sat beside you somewhere and sparked up a conversation. And we sort of choose how intensively or how focused we, what our energies we're going to give to that. Was there any point, thinking back, you're like, yeah, like this guy, like I'm not sure if I'm going to answer. I'm not sure if I'm going to engage. Did you have any moment like that?
I did. I always do at first. Whenever I communicate with anybody that I don't know, there's always that, not hesitation, but like just being cautious, just because you were pretty like adamant. Your communication was, I think, if I recall, you started off like pretty lighthearted, but you got heavy really fast. Like you were asking deep questions about podcasting. And I remember the one that just hooks in my mind is a question you asked around using music in your podcast.
I totally remember that one. That it's funny you should mention that one, because I thought that was the one. It was pure curiosity, but I thought, did I just put this guy on blast? But then you answered. Go ahead. Sorry, I jumped on you there. I remember that though.
No, I'm glad that you're jumping in with your recollection of that time, because I wonder, do you have the same thinking about it that I do? But we were going back and forth. You were talking about the technical aspects of podcasting. That's what we were going back and forth, because I think at that time you were like, this is kind of cool. I might want to get into this. So let me kind of just get some more information. Mm-hmm. And there was at one point, I remember it clearly, because it was just, you just dropped one DM. There was nothing else. There was no preamble. There was nothing. It was just, hey, dude, when you use music in your podcast, where do you get it from? And do you have permission to use it? And how long are you allowed to use it for? And I remember just looking down at my phone and thinking, oh, he's asking me a lot of good, hard questions about the use of music and copyright, and I can't answer him. So then I remember after that message, I remember taking a lot of time over the next little bit to consider and to think about my use of other people's music in my podcast. And then what you ended up doing is you got me to find different places on the internet where I could use music that was created for the sole purpose of my use, like no copyright, free for anybody to use as long as you mention them in your write-up or whatever, which I did. Mm-hmm. So I remember that was like a punch to the gut, because I was still early in my podcasting experience. I was still feeling the euphoria, the excitement that comes with the new thing that I was doing and learning about. And then you hit me with some reality, like, hey, you can't just, are you just grabbing any kind of music and using it? And I'm like, I remember thinking, is this guy a lawyer? What's this guy like? Because I didn't know you yet, right? So it's a good thing I met you face to face at the regional exchange, because that's where I realized that you were like a cool guy, authentic. You weren't out to cause problems. You weren't being a troll. You were just, you felt comfortable enough to just throw it out there and say, tell me about the music piece. I want to know. Because I remember you said, I think then later on you said that you had done some research and there were no clear answers. And that's when I was like, okay, I felt this responsibility. Like, this guy's listening to my podcast. He's asking me questions about how to do these things. So now I really shouldn't be a jerk and tell him, oh yeah, by the way, I just steal music. Like, none of it fit. So you got me on the straight and narrow path. And then I think my response was, I'm looking into this. I'm not really sure I can answer any of your questions. And then from there, I just moved in another way. But I mean, yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
I'm happy it turned out well. There was a lot at stake there for me, and whether or not that was playing, not in the questioning, it was in meeting you for the first time. There was a lot at stake. Part of it was, you know, I felt that your willingness to answer questions was cool. It fell in step with what I believed about it, what I believe in my soul about educators, is that sharing culture is kind of always an underlying theme. And I also knew, like, okay, I asked a very direct question. I cut through a lot of the haze here. This may or may not get answered in time. So I knew meeting you face to face, and others too that I had connected with there. Andrew Campbell was another one. I think Donna Miller Fry was there at that one too, right? So there were people that I had, started to connect with online, that the sudden realization that I'd never really met, I started to wrestle with, what is the difference here? Like, is there going to be a different version of a person that I'm going to meet in real life? And it didn't really occur to me, I think, until I just got off the highway and pulled into the driveway there, because I had never, before that as well, is like much of the PD that I had done. This was the transformation with that particular exchange. I had never been part of a provincial exchange. Up to that point, I had never gone. Up to that point, that was the seed point that got me looking outside of my school board for professional development. That was the moment. That moment started because I digitally met you and Stephen Hurley. That was so specific. So me being in that space, I was on fire. I was like, this is so cool. I had never heard of any of my colleagues going to something that had this scope. And I had never interacted with educators outside of my school board in a really intentional manner. So my perception on the other side of meeting with you and some of the other people is like, there was high value to this. I felt there was a prestige to this that some of my colleagues back, and even in talking about this moment back with some other colleagues, are like, really? Like, you went to a PD session that had nothing to do with your school board? Like, yeah. Now I get it. Ed camps and these other things exist. The opportunity to go to them exists. But I think it's only been, let's say, in the last 5 years that you start to see individuals participating in open professional development in somebody else's jurisdiction. I don't know. Apart from going to mega conferences, I'm not going to include those. But I'm saying where you can actually go and exist in something smaller, let's say like an ed camp, you're basically showing up at their staff meeting. And that was just kind of unheard of. But I had a sense of that. Like, this was one great big staff meeting happening in a Canadian context. So meeting you and other people, there was high value there. And I knew, I said, I have to walk away from this with a next level relationship. And connecting with you, having a sandwich and just kind of chatting, I felt like as I'm driving home, I'm like, I think I was on good behavior. I think I did okay. My mom, I think I was okay. I had good behavior today at school. And look at now, like I will say I'm so fortunate that we've developed. I am fortunate, and other people that to whom I've shared stuff that you have created, I would say that one of the benefits that has come out of you and I connecting is that I have been able to give more diversity to other people. I've been able to give more open-mindedness, and I've been able to sort of help others navigate spaces that I didn't have lived experience in. But this is the cool thing about the connection this way. So that was my sense of it. And that when I came in, did I go in for a hug the first time? Or was it a handshake?
I don't remember 100%, but I know that you are the type to just go in for the hug. So
it was the second time we met. I think it was the second time. Yeah.
Oh, well, the second regional exchange was like coming home to family, right? Because I was gonna get to chill with you, with Hurley, Campbell, another individual. His name escapes me right now, but we had something going on there. Like we had established connections. We had established connections at the first one.
Was Andrew there as well? Andrew Bernowski?
Yes.
He was at the second one.
Andrew B, Andrew C.
Cash. Who's last name Cash? Ken? No. Dave Cash.
Rodenizer was at the second one.
Rodenizer. Yeah, so there was definitely a broader scope.
And I think a group of us had already really gelled at the first one. So the second one was like coming home. I remember the second one seemed, it was just a lot easier to talk to people. It was a lot easier and that was an important one because I remember, and you mentioned this. When did you mention this? Did I write this down? Yes, I did. You talked at the beginning of this podcast about paying attention to signals of change and signals of like, just like road signs when you're in a moment.
And the shift from signals are good, but it's also good. Stay in the moment too. So there's that, that was the big thing about the exchange, right? That second one was trying to push us outside of the moment. And we had a lot of fun with that, I think, imagining what was actually being communicated along the signals that we saw, because so many people were looking at the same signal and kind of saying, I think it's coming from this planet. Well, no, I think it's maybe coming from this. Others like, I think it's just coming from deep in outer space, kind of a thing. So you're right.
If we could go deeper for a second, in the second regional exchange, we talked about signals of change, and we all had homework. We all had to bring 2 signals of change that we are seeing in our society, in our world. And that conversation, that for me was a deal breaker. That's when I knew that I was in the right place. Like, because, missing a day of school, for me, it was driving to Toronto, like, which, you and I talked briefly about the traffic that morning because you were coming in from Newmarket. It was that the payoff was huge, right? Like listening to all of you talk about the signals of change that you see out there. And I mean, I'll put it out there. My signals were like kindergarten material compared to some of the things you guys were talking about. And so even there, I was like, I was learning like on fast forward. That's what it felt like. I felt like somebody hit the fast forward button and I was trying to soak up everything all of you were saying. Now, even better after that exchange, knowing that my drive was going to be horrendous, Stephen Hurley, Andrew B, and Andrew C and I went for a beverage just down the street just to decompose. I think you had to go. You seemed like at that time of the day you were gone. You had to get back to your area, and D-Rod had to catch a flight. So it was like people were dispersing. I was
on kid pickup. I was on the hook that day to get the kids from school.
Okay.
And that drives everything, right? Pickup time's important. Yeah.
Whereas I didn't have that. I remember texting my wife saying, I'm gonna stay here for a bit. I'm gonna get a beverage with the guys because getting home is gonna be a nightmare. So I might as well decompress. And our conversation continued, and it slowed down a bit. It wasn't on fast forward, but listening to those guys, Andrew Baronsky, Andrew Campbell, and Stephen Hurley, like if you want to have a deep conversation about education, and if you want to decode it and actually go like deep, those are the 3 guys. Like I was the I could have been the barmaid, right? And bringing them the drinks because I just felt like I had nothing to offer listening to them talk. But it was that regional exchange. I'm glad that I was part of that experience. I thank Stephen Hurley for nudging me to kind of say, hey, you know what? You might want to consider putting your name in the hat for this experience because we're going to go deep with the EDU in Ontario and what's happening and what we think should happen and how the landscape should look. You really might want to consider being that part of that conversation. And boy, oh boy, was that ever an excellent experience for me. And it sounds like you feel the same.
Yeah, I would say it was catalyzing, right? And despite the fact that, you know, it's sort of a quick kind of label or brand that Hurley throws down for himself, I would have to agree. I'd have to agree. The dude is able to bring together, set a context and bring together really interesting opportunities. And yeah, anyone listening to this podcast, well worth connecting with Stephen Hurley, Voice Ed Radio, and the pieces, the playing pieces that he's put onto the EDU playing field are pretty cool.
Stephen Hurley, the father of Voice Ed Radio, right? He's the dad. Yeah. You and I are a couple of adopted kids. I wanted to say he is an EDU Sherpa that's not on the mountain anymore, right? Like he's a lot nicer about it than me, I think. Like I'm the one that's like, make sure you bring your parachute because yeah, we're gonna climb nicely to the top, but I think we might parachute. We're gonna leap off that bridge. He's a little bit more kind. He's like, nice path up, nice path down. Well, and I don't. In my view of him is that he's not out there anymore. He's not actually on the mountain taking you up and down. He's in the registration center down at the bottom. He's like the knowledgeable guy who's done it all, right? Like he's done every part of the EDU Sherpa experience, and now he's just kind of the guy at the bottom who takes people in and talks to you. He talks to you at a level that prepares you for the practice or that provides you with the necessary pieces to be able to do the hard work. That's how I see Stephen, because hired educator, doing a lot of things with the EdCan network and the whole Voice Ed Radio thing. So yeah, definitely if you've not heard of Stephen or if you're not connected with him, and you're an educator or a parent or anybody that has any stakeholder in public education, it's important that you check him out because he's got a lot to offer.
I'd be curious to hear who he puts on that mentor list for him.
Point. Yeah. Who does Stephen Hurley? Who's his Sherpa, right? Like who's helping him up and down the mountain?
I haven't talked. Maybe I should see if he'll talk with me on squirrels.
Oh, dude, he would be all over that. He would be all over that. In fact,
the first 3-hour episode of Chasing Squirrels, because he likes to tell me that I sort of overinvest, right? But maybe I got to drag him through that mud with me.
Oh, he would be knowing the Stephen that we both know. He'd be all over that, right? Being what do you mean? We'll see. What are you seriously throwing down right now? I am going to say on record that if you ask him to come on to Chasing Squirrels with you, he will say yes. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, so you're right.
I'm on the record here.
All right. Episode 70. Who knows? We'll see. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's part of it. Even if that happens, the conversation, and it's not like I'm not epi dropping here. I don't have one in the can that I've already done, just sort of testing the water. No, it hasn't happened. Steven, your people call my people. We'll figure it out. The only thing is, like, I think yours and my people are the same people. I always like to. I like to pause in those moments and just like, what is it that's sort of fueling their inspiration as well? You get caught up in this relational thing about being connected with that someone that really has helped you along. And you and I have done a lot of teasing out. We have some similar inspirations. We have some similar people, but we also have a different catchment as well. but then individuals like this, like, there's other people in that space too, like Donna Miller Fry, Andrew Campbell. They're these individuals that I put them kind of like in this other space that they kind of land in from wherever they come in, and they come in with such great critical analyses and sort of like points of view. And they're like, okay, this is good. Now you need to start your work. And then like, and they go back into their learning spaces and contexts. So these individuals that I respect, and I really have grown to appreciate their approaches to EDU. That's what I think about often. Like what's making that, like what you used to ask, like what motivates you? What's the thing that's motivating you to sort of do that work? So is this officially the longest episode we've had so far?
I want to say yes. I think we're getting close to an hour and 30 minutes.
All right.
And there's no GPS.
It's Friday. Good Friday.
Well, and neither one of our kids are like banging at the door. Like,
I'm
hey,
actually,
Dad, what?
Yeah, I can smell toast. Someone's making food, and it still smells like toast, which means nothing's on fire yet. So yeah.
So then before we shut down, let me say that the people you mentioned, Donna, Andrew Campbell, Stephen Hurley, they all have skills. Like they all have, well, let me kind of dig deeper into that. They all have excellent leadership skills in terms of being able to step into a conversation and help mold it, shape it, direct it, even step away from it and facilitate. They all have that. I've seen Stephen do it. I've seen Donna do it informally. I've seen Andrew do it.
You know who else is good at it too? Really good. Like it's funny when I get into a conversation, I'm like, oh, I got to stay in it. I got to stay in it. Because for me, I feel like I'm going to miss the trajectory. Is it Matthew Aldridge?
Yes, Matthew Aldridge.
So good. Getting these great conversations moving. And then, there could be a couple days and then he's back in and he adds another layer to it. And it's very enticing. Like, it's not the type of thing where like, everything was set up just to shut this moment down. It was like this really cool exploration. So yeah, he's another one that I would put in that space. Sorry to jump in. I'm trying to think of the other individuals that I'm really in awe of how they motivate me to want to pursue a conversation. I think that's what it comes down to.
No problem with you jumping in. Now you got me thinking about Will Gourley.
Yes, Will Gourley is another one.
Will Gourley is another one. They just, for sure. Matthew, Jonathan So even has, Jonathan has it there, right? Like,
can I go really wide for a second? Refrans Davis.
For sure. Yeah.
Like a bit of a mind blower too, like to just drop a thing and it has equal weight to sort of just generate a conversation, but also stay in the conversation. Yeah, that's another cool one. Going
wide as well, Sarah Thomas. She is deep. Like she is so open and so inclusive. The things she's done. I wanna drop for you someone who's in my mind has recently come on the scene in terms of opening up conversation and facilitating it and leading it is Jason Trin. He is he's a Toronto educator, high school, and full disclosure, he is a Google innovator, and I'm working with him as his mentor, but really it's the other way around. He's more my mentor. But long story short, Jason recently started a conversation that involves educators working together to innovate, to lead, to rise together to change education. He started a group called the Racialized Educators for Action and Leadership. And so, when Jason kind of hit me on the side of the head with that, I was completely blown away. I'm like, holy cow, where'd this come from? Like, this is, and not not where did this come from? Like, you're not capable of this. Where did this come from? Like, has this been sitting in your mind and you just been waiting to kind of let it out? Like, this is awesome stuff. For me as a visible minority and an educator, it hits home. So, I mean, that's probably why it's got a little bit more impact on me than it might have on other people. But like, I see Jason as someone who's now jumping on the scene. And you know what, you and I was, before you know, so politely interrupted me, I was dropping Michelle Cordy's name, who I have not been in contact with in a long time, but Michelle has that ability as well. I've seen it in real life, and there's nothing better than that, right? When we talk about some of these educational Sherpas, um, for me, there's more power in having met them face to face and having seen them do their work face to face. I want to go back to Donna Miller Fry for a second. Not only did I have the experience of like listening to her speak and interacting with her at the regional exchanges, but around that time, I was taking my Principal Part 2 course, and I relied heavily for a part of one of my presentations on the consultation I got from Donna. And she was able to provide me with a whole new perspective in a whole new realm of educational leadership that I was kind of exploring, and that I was going to be sharing with my colleagues who were taking the course. And so a big thumbs up to her, because I kind of cold called her. Like, she knows who I am, but I kind of just hit her up one day and said, listen, I'm doing this. You've done a lot of work in this area. Can you please hold my hand and walk me through the garden? And she was like more than happy to do so. You know what I mean? And like went above and beyond. And it's the people like that and the connections that I've made through social media that way that have been so powerful. Like, I think the things that I've created or that I've been part of since really getting a good grasp of the use of Twitter, for example, to grow my professional learning network has been incredible. A lot of the things that I've been involved in or I've co-created or created have come from the ideas, the talk, and the perspective of the people that I interact with, like in a professional way on social media. There's no denying it. It's been a lot more powerful than my face-to-face interactions with the people in my building. Now, where the two worlds come together and harmonize in a beautiful way is when the people I work with in my system are also people that I communicate with and connect with on social media. And when the two come together, it's explosive. So, for example, in my school board, there's a handful of innovators that I know of, and there's a ton I don't know of, but there's a handful I know of that I see at these committee meetings I go to, because we're all kind of rolling in the same circles. It's amazing to be able to just to read one thing on social media about what they did, and then to say, hey, I saw that and I knew I'd be seeing you here today. Tell me about it. And then they give you a hint, right? They start telling you about their process, where it came from, how it's playing out, their next steps. And then I take from that what I think is going to work with my community, and I go back and I do it, or I try one piece of it that then allows me to innovate and turn it into something that's different, that's meant for my population. Because one of the things that I've said a lot at many of the presentations I've done about the things I've done with my students is, this is my perspective. This is my lived experience. So if you take what I've done and you apply it to your lived experience, it might not come out the same way. So what I always wanted people to take away from my presentations was, look at what someone like me has been able to do with young kids. And then if you can take just a piece of what I'm doing or what I'm saying, or if it jogs something in your mind that you can run with, do it, because the payoff is going to be huge. And you're going to get this feeling that anything's possible, and that you don't have to follow a particular formula to lead your students to success. It can happen in a number of different ways. So I'm glad that we didn't shut down, you know, like 30 minutes ago, because if we had, we would have never gotten into any of this. And I think this is it's almost like we're in a really good stride here, and now we're about to let it go. That's how I'm feeling.
That's okay. I think if over the next, let's say over the next 4 episodes, we drop an extra 30 minutes, we'll catch up on where we could have been had we not taken our hiatus. So there we go. That's what I look at it. We're still doing the conversation, just adding it on to the next space.
Is there anything more that you want to throw down before we shut this down and move on with our long weekend?
Sure. I am. I think I will be leaving Twitter as of Canada Day. So, yes, Roland, I completely agree with everything you said about Twitter. And that notwithstanding, I'm testing the leaving social media altogether as of the last day of school, so Canada Day. So,
okay, so just so everybody knows, this has not come up. You've not mentioned to me in an on-ramp, off-ramp, direct message, text. You've not mentioned it. This is the first time I'm hearing that you're considering leaving Twitter. Now, I know we've talked about breaking up with the internet, and both you and I have dropped things, but you're seriously considering dumping Twitter.
Yes. Yeah, moving away from Twitter. Social media, period. So that wouldn't be a bait and switch where I would sort of come back to Facebook or Instagram, but that'll be ongoing. I'll talk more about that. We can talk more about that. I love, and part of it is it's been percolated. If anybody, cares to reach out to @Pam Sheena, who's my colleague, we've had conversations about this, and she's in a space where she really is, she's like, what? You're like Twitter guy. I'm like, see, and that's one of the reasons I don't know if I am. I don't know if I am Twitter guy. What does that even mean? But anyways, I'm exploring that side of it, is the purpose and the power that it has over me. So this is an ongoing reflection that I've had with my own thinking, as in, breaking up with the internet. It has something to do with the type of data that other people own of mine. It has something to do with still looking to build authentic experiences and relationships. And can it be done without social media? I've watched a few times. I think it was a few years back, I saw a talk from Cal Newport about his time away from, how he perceives the value of social media. There's a couple other individuals in there that are that take sort of like an internet fast. They get away from it for a year and what they've learned. But yeah, I'm Canada. So the last day of school, Canada Day, will be, I won't be there anymore. So this is an evolving story. We're keeping an eye on it, but yeah, we'll see.
So you dropped that on me. That's interesting. Hey, Chris, you want to say anything else before we shut down the podcast for this week? Yeah, I'm leaving Twitter.
Dude, the problem, the thing was, it wasn't that I had the idea. It's that you asked. That's the power of a good question. And the framing of it, because you're talking about the power of Twitter, and so am I.
Fair enough. And I'm totally looking forward to talking with you more about this. And actually,
that one podcast where I'm just like this the whole time. can't check my feed anymore. What's Roland? I hear you, Roland. I'm DTing over not having Twitter. We'll see. Yeah, I'm looking for it. I also think summer, it's a good time to sort of explore that side as well.
Yeah, and maybe, you should never say never.
I like saying that, though. I really do. That's me getting to the top and mentioning, oh yeah, by the way, this isn't a backpack, it's a parachute. Let's go.
Fair enough. Well, I look forward to hearing more about like your process, your thinking behind this. I mean, as shocked as I looked,
you had a new gesture. Can I give it back to you for a second?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And it was a little like it was yeah, it's a similar response I've had from other people as well. So
I have to say though, the flip side is there is something refreshing about it. Like if I take a moment to think, me post Twitter gone, there's something refreshing about it. I mean, it's
do you see
I'm
yourself there? Can
not at the moment. I see myself, I feel like I'm in a really good place with it. Like I feel like there's see the thing is for me there's always new people to follow. There's always something to learn, to pick up. But it's getting to the point kind of where it's too there's not enough amplification of certain people. And so I don't know, I just feel like right now I have a handle on it, and I think I've told you that there are some things, there are some stops that I've put into place, because if I don't put those stops in place, I think my time with Twitter and my work with Twitter could turn into something different. I really feel like I understand it, and I feel like I'm in a position where I can speak to it, and I can offer suggestions to people who want to use it and harness it for a variety of reasons. I really feel I have something there to offer, which is good because I feel like competent. But at the same time, it does take up my time, and it can be a problem sometimes, and it has been a problem in the past. So there's something refreshing about it. It's just I wasn't expecting to hear you say that, because I know as you've been letting go and as you've been breaking up with the internet, like it's weird because I'll be on Facebook and I'll see something that I think you'd like, and then I'm like, oh well, I can't tag him. He's gone. He's not in this space anymore, and so I just move on. And so that is going to be interesting come Canada Day to not be able to, like for example, the pictures you share, your little doodles and sketches of our conversations. I guess I won't be seeing those on Twitter anymore. I don't tweet about the Decoded podcast. You do. So that's going to be a new realm because, I just don't. So it's funny though, right?
I'll still be posting the content because I'm keeping my blog. I'm just starting. It'll be, you're right. And it's funny. I like what you just mentioned there is something that's given me pause, because there's the other in the relationship. So my choice to not be in that space is only one half of the actual relationship. So for me, I would love that you mentioned that, because now how do I still leverage that kind of open-ended, positive, benevolent sharing without having that tool to get it to me? Because I'll tell you, I still want the cool stuff cool things that you share. Now, one of the benefits is that things that are posted on Twitter, you can still view. So I can still go with intention and look. You can still go and look, unless people have their accounts completely locked down. You can still observe Twitter. So it's still a resource that I can walk up to and I can pay attention to. But there's no longer the automaticity of things falling on my desk. So I'm going to have to work harder to go and find things. But I think in that grind, it'll be better for me. I will get better at searching, because I'm still going to get the random. All I have to do is call up any of the individuals that I think are cool. And I'm not only going to see their posts, but I'm going to see the connections in their posts. And I can chase those in the exact same way, but with intention. Yeah. So thank you for mentioning that, though, because the relationships on that end, I still want to nurture that part where I get stuff. I just have to figure out, how does that happen without the automatic point and click? And can it even happen? So
well, I guess we'll see. We're going to have to.
I don't know.
You make me think, is there an option on Twitter to put an account on hiatus rather than just deleting everything? Now, I'm just asking this for myself. I'm not suggesting to you that you do this, but I wonder, like for people who have traction on Twitter and who have made all kinds of amazing connections, is there a way to turn it off, to see how things go rather than just, is it, you're either there or you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I totally. You know, I put out there. You okay with still chatting? Do you want to?
I'm good. I'm good.
I can remember I was in a conversation about something similar. I would start off with talking to Andrew Campbell about this, but talking about what version of social media would you design if you could. So, you know, Andrew Campbell and I got into it more from a subscription point of view. What would you be willing to pay for so that the company used zero of your data, you could get in and out at any time, and yet still had all the functionality of the marketing giant that the actual company could do, because there is an element of that type of honey does draw the bees. So there's right now there's an overwhelming, to some degree, blind belief that Twitter is the only place you can have a digital PLN. It is. I would say, I think I will officially declare it is the official winner. You could come in. I've had a couple conversations with individuals that said, well, no, you can use WhatsApp, you could use Voxer, you could use Flipgrid, but I all look at these as somehow being amplified through Twitter. And on top of which, you can do the similar things in Twitter. So, you know, it's a beast, and it is the beast that most people leverage to say, if you want to start building your digital PLN, here you go. I think because it is open and you can observe, like I said, you can see tweets apart from blocked accounts, or protected accounts. You can see tweets, you can observe and lurk without ever creating a Twitter account. And then if you decide to jump in, well, then you just have a little bit more access. Then you have presence as well, so people can send you stuff through the actual program. So it's fascinating, because I've asked myself that for a while. What would I be willing to pay? Because it is something that's not mine, so you got to pay. What would I be willing to pay per month to have 100% control, yet all the functionality? And haven't landed anything on there yet, but that's part of what's fueling the breaking up with the internet conversation.
I definitely heard this from Andrew Campbell before, and I think you and I, it's come up in conversation somewhere along the way, and I agree 100%. I for one would be totally interested in something like that, and I think it's funny because the idea is out there now for somebody to grab and do something with. So what are they waiting for, right? Like it's got to happen, but until then, you know, I don't know. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. Like, now that I've had a little bit more time to sit with what you said about leaving Twitter, it's one of those moments where I actually feel the same amount of refreshment and relief as I do hesitation and fear. Like, this literally sitting right there. Because a world without having Twitter would be nice. Like, for you, for me, whatever. But then I think about, well, what about all the connections? What about all the good stuff that comes from that flowing river? That river's flowing all the time, 24/7, and you can just come to it and you can get a cup of that water anytime. You're basically moving away from the river. Like, you're selling your house and going to the city where you're not going to get that. But obviously you're doing that to get something else or to gain something else. So
it's the gain.
Okay. What is your initial thought on the gains that you're going to be making from departing?
I have seen there's a direct correlation between my state of mind. I would say there's no particular order. Here's my observations. When I left Facebook and Instagram, the time that I had to spend with my own mind increased. The time that I had to spend with my kids increased. The productivity time, we talked about this before, moving through that process of getting better at doing podcasts and declaring that you don't have time to do things. Where are you using the time when you do save time? And that's overly mathematical, but I use that as a measurement as to whether I'm maximizing living my life. And this is your fault to a degree. I will tell you, this is your fault. You and I have had a lot of off-tape conversations about authenticity, about being honest with yourself, and what is the evidence just beyond that initial signal from something that says, you should stop, you should slow down. So life at this point has also given me some signals that I'm really looking to push against and see whether or not it's real. We've talked a little bit about health stuff, talked a little bit about relationship stuff. So where I look to gain and to be able to spend more time there, because we've also said there's only 24 in a day. You got those hours. What are you doing with them? What are you doing with them? And can you account for them so there isn't the lost time? So when I look at that list of things where I potentially lose time, I will never, ever, ever say that I lose time by investing in my spouse and my children. I will never, ever say that I lose time by investing in friendships and in my community and my neighborhood. When I start to move outside of that and in some of the, let's say, singular spaces, and where it's just me, it's only me in that space. And as a dad, as a teacher, there's not a lot of those spaces. It seems like there's always something else in there. But when I look at those spaces where it's just me, am I feeding the same philosophy? Am I actually making my life better? And then you have to take another step back and say, well, what's the life that I want to have? And then you have to step through that and say, okay, what's the work I have to do to get those? So I'm caught in that circle right now. And I don't see clearly that Twitter in itself is propelling me into a better version of me. I can't do the mathematics there. Not saying I don't enjoy it. I'm not saying that I haven't found cool things there, but just like that first question that I posed to you about, can we actually sort of, use music like that? Like, how do you get the music? That's sort of cutting to the chase there. I'm using that exact same questioning technique with myself, just to kind of lift a bit of the fog. Is it serving me in the same way that I want to be in service to others? And that's where I start to kind of go, well, we're gonna have to break this down a little bit, Clough. So that's where I'm at. And I could go down the path of there's research that supports it. There's mindfulness activities that support. I can put all that down as well. I'm not coming off just like, oh, I had a revelation. This has been a slow sort of analysis of my own behavior and putting myself at the center of building best life, whatever that might be.
I can certainly attest to the fact that this has been a slow burn for you. Like, I know that you've been contemplating this. Now, for me, for me, there were no hints, right, that you were going to try to move away from Twitter. But I know it's been a slow burn because for the past year or so, you and I have been talking a lot about you leaving. So like, you left Facebook, you left Instagram, you dropped Voxer. I never got into Flipgrid, but I have no interest. It's funny too, right? Because I'm a guy who usually is talking about new stuff and harnessing, leveraging the new stuff. I enjoy that, but there's a new thing that I'm just not interested in. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it doesn't have any benefits. I'm just saying I'm not going down that road. So you're going to have to talk to, John Q. Public next door to me to find out how Flipgrid's being harnessed in the classroom, because you're not going to get that from me.
Can I throw down one of the things here's the controversy in I still support all those tools. And I think others should. I'm just openly sharing that I don't think they're for me anymore. And that's that weird space. Wrestling with, is there will people find that strange, and that they'll question my authenticity if I can speak to the power of those tools, and they are fantastic. And yes, you should try them. And then they're like, okay, where can we tweet you? I'm like, no, I've left the building. I'm not on Twitter anymore, right? So, but I think that's the discussion. That's the analytical discussion, that if we choose to sort of like share, or the opportunity is presented in a safe space, like I think you and I have here, I'll speak my mind and I'll put it down there. And I do believe to a certain degree that the emotional response of the individual across from me. It's their adult responsibility to kind of work through the implications of that, right? And not to make it about, well, what are you doing? Like, Clough, you're crazy. Like, that's so wrong. And yeah, I think I mean, I'll stay in that conversation, but I tend to find like that's where they're projecting their sort of like sensibilities about them leaving the internet without asking a good question like you did as to why I'm considering it. Because I think as soon as you open yourself up to asking that good question like you did, it's about entertaining multiple ideas in your head without feeling compelled to actually commit to one. And isn't that the most amazing thing about the human condition, that we can be confused? What you do with that becomes a very personal kind of pursuit then. And it's not necessarily about that other person. And you don't get to keep saying, you know, to a degree, why do you keep confusing me? Because at some point you're on the hook as the adult to kind of figure stuff out. And I'm okay if someone says, I'm not going to leave Twitter. It is absolutely 100% valuable to me. And I will accept that as well. That's not confusing to me. I completely understand that. I would and if they ask me, why are you doing it? I would answer exactly, or in some derivative form, what I gave to you. And it's only an aha to me. I don't expect other people to kind of go, wow, Clough. Like, I'm not looking for that at all. I'm more than happy to talk about it. This is just a revelation. This is something that's powerful for me. Yeah.
And that's the bottom line, right? You got to do what's best for you. And of course, there's going to be people who are going to question your authenticity. Of course, there are people questioning and judging us all the time, just like unfortunately we do to them as well. Sometimes we are aware of it and sometimes we are not. But yeah, you just got to do what you got to do. It's kind of neat. It's like it makes me laugh because I could picture you at like an EdTech summit where you talk about your development and progress post social media, right? Like mark my words, this will become a thing. People like you and I'm using us in high regard right now, which maybe I shouldn't.
It's okay. I think it's okay. Air high five. Here we go. Ready? Air high five. Just a quick one. Boom. Okay, there we go. I think it's okay to do that once in a while.
So people like you and I, and maybe I'll take it outside the realm. Let's use Andrew Campbell as an example, because I know Andrew well enough that I don't think he'll have an issue with me using him as an example.
He is the resistance.
He is the resistance.
He's the resistance.
And I'm confident that he'll be okay with this. And if he's not, he'll tell me. But
he might not listen to 1 hour 45 in. We might have to say, just cue it up, Andrew, cue it up. Okay, hey, if Rogan can do it, we can do a 2-hour episode. I really don't give a damn.
Hey, we're feeling low right now. We still have 60 in the tank. So that's what keeps me going. But anyway, nobody will understand that reference. Andrew's not even going to hear this, so he's never going to know we were talking about him. But let's say I could see somebody like Andrew within the next 4 to 5 years being a presenter at Echo or EdTech or one of these big EdTech type things post social media and talking about the work he's done or the connections he's made or the power of PLN or whatever you want to call it, post social media. I think that'll be the next thing. And mark my words, someone's going to keynote that soon enough. I wish it was me, because I'd love to talk about it, but it won't be me. It will be somebody else who has the idea, who takes it and profits from it, because that's what people do at that level. They profit. Don't connect that with Andrew. I'm not saying Andrew goes around with ideas trying to profit from them, but what I'm saying is that someone out there who does that for a living, that will be the next big thing. You wait and see. Mark my words, the next big thing will be post Twitter, post Facebook. Like, we don't need it anymore because now we've gone through it. It's given us what we need. It's helped us develop, and we've evolved into something else, something different, and now we don't need it anymore. And this is how you operate outside of it. You see, I mean, it's there, because I can say that because using you as an example, and you're not the first educator to leave Twitter, having established having established a good traction with it. I'd be naive to think that you're the first. You're not. We know that. But knowing you and knowing how much you have to offer your learning network and the people that connect with you, I still see you developing and growing outside of it. And like you said, you can always come to it and take a look. You can intentionally find my page and gather information from what I'm sharing or what discussions I'm part of or whatever I'm doing. You can still do that. But I think that there's always a next level. And either we can't see it or someone's not brought it to our attention so that it is like right in front of us and we're completely aware of it. Some people are just not there. Like, for example, I can see it. Am I ready to drop Twitter? No. But maybe watching you and seeing you develop and continue to grow after it, that might do something for me. I don't know. Right? Like I said, I've never gotten into Flipgrid.
Yeah.
I think between the two of us, I was the first one to dump Voxer.
Yeah.
And I think maybe you gave me one of these when I did that, I think. Like, you gave me that look. They're like, oh, really? But you said it was such a powerful thing. And I'm like, it is a powerful thing. And it still can be. It's just not something that I'm going to be leveraging anymore.
Here's what I wrestled with. Here's what I wrestled with in that moment. And I think this is something that becomes the moment of clarity. Part of my response in that, what I realized, and it was so ego-centered, it was but what about me? I just got here and now you're leaving. And it completely, because I actually thought that. I was like, because part of me checking out Voxer, it was something, well, so part of me playing with Voxer was communicating with you. It was also a little bit of can this deliver on a PLN? Like, I was sort of trying to play that. I mean, I was in a book club. I was testing it out. And then when you dropped out of it, it was, to a degree, it was a little bit like a planet dropped out of my universe. And my initial response was like, really? Come on. Like, I thought we were going to kind of give this a go for a small moment. And then I started to settle into, I'm like, but this is the choice. This is also the choice. We need to be able to choose first where we go for our PLN. And that almost always has to have primacy, that we are choosing, we recognize that we have a choice to where we go for the PLN. The moment that we feel compelled, either by system or by colleagues or by advertisement, that one space is the only place, that's no different than having no place. And that was the realization that was a powerful realization to me, because in my mind, I thought this guy kind of knows what to use and what to do. And the lesson that it taught me is that it's not about, I'm not going to measure as negative and somehow it hurts me somehow that he's leaving. This isn't about me. This is about his choice to sort of use a tool differently or to not use a tool at all. And it really crystallized for me what I feel for some doesn't feel like a clear choice. They have to go there. And this is why I say Twitter's the official winner, because I think there's this giant compulsion to go there, which again is fine. I'm looking at the counterspin is like, is there another way to do it? Is there another way to get to the same richness and not use Twitter? Is there a way to do it? And not feel bad if people choose not to use it, because in the end, it's not about, it's the one thing about having that sort of village mentality for your PLN. Sure, the convenience for everyone to go to the same space is really convenient. But that type of gravity also creates the silo where there's a lot of the same content that's being, there's a lot more to the membership than meets the eye. And you move through those gates so quickly from the starting point of taking in all the awe, and then at somewhere near the ending point where you have a book deal. And I'm making there's a large path within there, and you don't have to follow it. But I tend to see where you end up on that entirely branded promotional side and using the tool in a very different way than what sparked you up for using it in the first place. So that's when you left Voxer, that was a game changer. Again, your fault. Your fault. You were part of the fault in my thinking, the positive fault in my thinking.
I don't know what to say. All I know is it was like you. It was an app that wasn't that was causing more problems than positives. So it was time to go. But I'm glad. It's really neat to hear you talk about it, and that you gained something from me. That's pretty cool, I think. I just at the end of the day, people have to do what's best for them, right? That's the bottom line. And it stinks because you get that feeling that, oh, I just got here because of this person, and now they're just walking away from it. Like that stinks. And that's the reality for some people. And it's real, right? Like you can't deny that. But at the same time, it's just all about, you just got to do what you got to do. And like I said, to this day, I still see stuff on Facebook and I think, oh, Clough would like this. And I'm like, Clough's not here, So the phantom Clough syndrome, where you still think it's there, but it's not. Anyway, long story short, I look forward to hearing more about this evolution for you. Because like I said, at this moment in time, I'm not ready to do that, but it'll be interesting to kind of use this podcast, for example, as an avenue to have your thoughts shared with respect to that process, that preparation. Maybe you don't need preparation, I don't know. But it's going to be neat to kind of see how it plays out leading up to Canada Day. Because if we're still podcasting by then, it means that we survived a full school year of this experiment of the Decoded podcast week by week as we go through our work week by week.
That's something pretty cool, dude. I think that's cool. I think
agree.
That harmony of context is cool. I don't think I have I don't feel the full weight of this conversation yet. And I don't know what distance or what thing will give me that, I don't know, that sort of like, holy, what have we done kind of a thing. Because it does feel like we've just fallen in step with really cool conversation and stayed in tune with what I think was our sort of loose intent, which was, kind of, stay the authentic line, bring in father life, bring in teacher life, and then that sort of bigger 30,000 feet educator, bring it down. How's it forcing us to dig in every single day? So yeah, I'm still there, definitely there.
I even think, like, if everything goes well and we're still interested or whatever, I would love to continue through the summer too, because I think it'd be cool to document. So what are these two teacher dads doing over these summer months, right? And it'll be nice to show, well, I'm speaking for myself, it'll be good to talk about the reflection phase of ending a school year and then the preparation phase for the start of the next school year, all intermixed with leisure time, right? Like, I don't have to wake up and go to work. My partner is in the same position. We're both educators. My children are still in the education system. What does that look like? I mean, the stereotypical response is, oh, they're teachers, they're living large all summer. No, dude, it's not living large all summer. It's, holy cow, what just happened this school year? And now I have the time to deal with that. And then the second phase of the summer is, well, now I need to start thinking about how I'm going to prepare as loosely as I can for what's going to happen in September. The anxiety that comes with that, and the preparation for the new learning, because you're going to have a whole crew of new kids. For me, it's looking like I may not be teaching the same grade that I'm currently teaching. So there's that level of, I don't know what you want to call it, that level of discomfort, I guess you could say. I mean, yeah, I'm good. Like, when I let go of my former podcast, Roland Chidiac Connects, a podcast about connecting with people and finding out what they do, why they do it, I was happy. And that when I connected with you about this project, I still get to podcast. And that was important to me. And I just didn't know how it would play out. So even, I guess, I let go of my podcast when it was just starting to roll. But it had gotten to the point where it wasn't working anymore in terms of like my personal life, and it wasn't a good place to be. So I had to move on. And it's funny because every now and again, I hit on something that brings me right back to it. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I just don't, I'm not 100% comfortable with it, and I'm not 100% uncomfortable with it. It's there. It happened. I don't regret it, but it's just not for me at that, like, in my space. But this is more for me. So I get to podcast. I get to have a great conversation with you, and I trust you as an educator. I call you a friend, so it works. But yeah, who knows? Summer might happen, and we might both be shifting. Like, you're shifting off Twitter, so who knows, right? You don't know. You just got to go with the flow. You got to do what's right for you. And the best part, so if I can look at a huge positive, is what has been created, right? So the time with my podcast, it was a year long. Basically, it was a year experience. And I'm proud that I was able to be disciplined enough and open enough to do something like that. You know what I mean? It's like my blog. I remember when I first started blogging, people said to me, well, like, who's going to read this? What's this for? What's the purpose? And I remember being very clear many, many years ago. It's not for anybody else. It's for me. It's a way for me to document my journey. And the catalyst was that I was part of a project that required some type of documentation of the journey, of the process. And being someone interested in technology and digital spaces, I thought, well, what better way than to start blogging? And now when I look at my blog, I'm very proud of the content that's there. I'm very proud of what has come from that experience over many years. And so for me, part of doing things is always to be able to look back on the accumulation of creation, of content, of experience, because now I feel like I can speak to podcasting, because not only do I do it now, but I had my own for a full year. I connected with a lot of people. I learned a lot of things. I even look back to when I first started. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was reaching out to people, and I was dealing with a lot of technical issues that I've now overcome. It's building my capacity, my foundation, that the next time I hit something that's hard for me, I can look back on those times and say, I have experience dealing with hard things. I can get through this. I can get through this, and I'm going to have to rely on the grit, the hard work, and the attitude I had for those other things that I've done and accomplished, and apply them to the new things that I'm dealing with that are going to be hard, that I might not want to do. And so for me, it's just that accumulation. And there's something about that I really enjoy.
I agree with all of it. If we stick through, next year will be the year of me transitioning out of the program that I'm in. So that'll be the process for next year. What's my process to leave a term position? So 3 years is the official end. So that'll be part of the focus for next year. Inevitably, it's going to be part of the focus. How am I making connections? How am I reaching out? The interview process. Yeah, all of that will be part of next year.
That's incredible, because, like, okay, so along the same lines, if I'm teaching a different grade, then this podcast is going to be the place to talk about how I'm transitioning, right? Mm-hmm. How are things working out? What am I dealing with? I didn't even consider that you're going to be moving out of your position.
The school too, likely a different location altogether. So we'll definitely have things to dig into for season 2 of Decoded.
That's funny, because we can actually call them seasons, because they're school years.
Yeah.
So what would we call the summer? Because season 1 ends at the end of June when the school year ends. So would the summer just be like an experimental time of, like, preparing for season 2?
Yeah, it'll be like a drop-in center. It'll be a little bit more just when some fires get lit, hey, let's chat this one. We can keep talking too, but it could also be, it's going to be probably according to a similar scheduling as, yeah, you know what, we're out of the country. Oh yeah, we got baseball. And like, okay, I have no doubt that things are going to spark up that both of us will feel compelled to want to share with each other. I got no doubt.
Well, I'm not going to ask you right now if there's anything else you want to drop before we let it go, because the last thing you dropped led to another hour of the Decoded podcast. So I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to say that this was a good episode. This was 27. Sorry, last time I messed up with the numbers. This is episode 27 of the Decoded podcast with Chris Clough and Roland Chidiak. Dads, teachers, one's in high school, one's in elementary. And every week we talk about, or we try to talk about, what's happening with us in our work. Doesn't always turn out that way, but it's all good because we have no GPS and we're almost at a gap, but we're just driving the car. We're just moving along. So
2 hours later, we've arrived.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not out of gas yet.
We're not yet, yeah.
From my perspective, this is Easter weekend. So I'm going to say happy Easter because that's kind of my perspective. And from other people's perspective, I hope everybody has a great long weekend. And Chris, I know next weekend is going to be weird for you because you're supposed to be at the EdTech Summit. So I don't know what's going to happen with the next.
I was going to ask you, do you want to try? Do you want to try? I can do one from there.
I'm more than happy to try.
Okay, let's see if we got the bandwidth, or maybe I'll have to hardline. We'll see what the capacity is. I don't know what time everything starts at, but I was actually thinking that out. Like, that'd be kind of cool.
But even if bandwidth is an issue, then maybe our YouTube thing, we turn off the cameras so that we can conserve some bandwidth. Okay.
Let's try though. I'm more than, put it this way, I'm more than happy to just, go in and drop an episode, and then I'll just flip and start doing my session. I don't need to, I got no problem. If people are like walking in the room, I'm like, yeah, I'm just finishing up a podcast now. I got no problem.
If you want to try it and we can make the times work, then I'm in.
Cool, man.
You should just, in your classroom, you should just write on the whiteboard or whatever. I'm in the middle of a podcast.
On air.
I'm on air right now. Come right in, sit down, and see what it's like to actually do this, right? Because you're going to be talking about podcasting, right?
Yeah. Yes. In essence, the question wrestling that goes along with it. So more setting up the pieces, and that, like, I'm just hoping to wind a bunch of people up and set them free like minions on gathering basically audio. We're going to see. I'd see if I can sort of ramp them up to, like, you can do this. You can don't get caught up in the big picture of the podcasting. Just do these small things and you are podcasting. So,
okay. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
Cool, man.
See ya.
Take care, man.